Surah Ash-Shura. And then further Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ وَالَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشِ. And those who abstain from major sins and indecencies, like fawahish, anything that is related to indecency. Fawahish is, for instance, fornication, and anything that related to that, that's fawahish. And one interpretation of fawahish is that a person, it is part of the kaba'ir, is part of the great sins, but that person shamelessly and openly does that in the open, right? And other people get affected by it. Like lying is one of the great sins, that's one of the kaba'ir, right? Those who lie, and those who cheat, and those who fornicate, and those who disobey their parents, who are not good to their parents, and those who miss prayer. All of that is a kaba'ir. But indecency, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that specifically, although it was included, but He singled that out from all the great sins. He singled that out to tell us that this is a very important thing. And in the later days, in the latter days that we are living in now, this thing is going to become normal, right? People shamelessly do a lot of things that we consider the kaba'ir, great sins. And people not only do it openly, but also they boast about it. They show off. They post it on social media about their kaba'ir, the great sins. So that's fawahish, that you are affecting other people. And other people are then becoming used to that when they see it once and twice and keep on seeing those things, kaba'ir. So those who abstain from kaba'ir, from great sins. In these special nights, we want to make Tawbah, all of us, as a Muslim community, to make Tawbah from the kaba'ir. Because those who make Tawbah are like those people who have, as if they never committed a sin. Once you make Tawbah, you are from the people who didn't commit any sin. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah An-Nisa about the believers and some of the qualities that is mentioned there. وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا فَعَلُوا. Over there specifically Allah mentions the word fahisha. Sins of indecency. إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً. The sins that they commit openly. What they do? أَوْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. Or they transgress over themselves, meaning the sins that they commit between them and Allah, and it doesn't relate to people. ذَكَرُوا. Number one, they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And that's why the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so important for you to protect yourself from disobeying Him. And therefore, one of the sins that the scholars mention is a person he's not cognizant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his life. Like Allah is not so important in his life, right? And that's why, people do commit sins because they're not in the state of remembrance. So that's why the first step is to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told me not to do this. And Allah forbade me to do this action, and I've done it. ذَكَرُوا اللَّهَ فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا لِذُنُوبِهِمْ. And they seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explores the idea of istighfar. That what is it like? Right? ذَكَرُوا اللَّهَ فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا وَمَنْ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I'm the only one who can forgive. So seek forgiveness from me. وَلَمْ يُصِرُّوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلُوا. That's important. Right? You do it, and right away, you remember Allah, and you ask for forgiveness, and you say, oh Allah, I'm not going to do it again. It's not that, okay, I'm going to make istighfar, and then I'm going to go right back to it. Some people make their plans, right? It's Ramadan, I'm going to stay away, and I have my plans lined up after Ramadan. These are the things I'm planning to do. We don't want to be that Ramadani. We don't want to be that person who spends the Ramadan just to get through the month and then right back to it. That person is a loser. The Prophet ﷺ stood on this minbar And he said, بَعُدَ مَنْ أَدْرَكَ رَمَضَانَ لَمْ يُغْفَرْ لَهُ. That person is away from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who was in the month of Ramadan and could have gained the mercy of Allah and the forgiveness of Allah, but he never got that. So having that intention of not going back to the sin, that's key. لَمْ يُصِرُّوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلُوا وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. However, we are human beings. Allah made us of the one of the downside of our being a human being, which also is in our favor, is that we forget. Forgetfulness is actually a blessing in a disguise, right? Because we commit to something and then we forget and then we do it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does recognize that. And He says, وَلَمْ يُصِرُّوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلُوا وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. That perhaps maybe they will slip at some point, make a mistake at some point. Is that they give up hope? No. And the scholars mention one of the kaba'ir, one of the great sins is having a bad opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, giving up hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you always have to be optimistic that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to answer your call. And make it a point, make it a Ramadan that this is going to be my turning point. I want to make istighfar tonight and make tawbah that inshallah I'm making a firm intention and I'm going to have a plan. I'm going to have a plan to make sure that I don't go back to the things that I was doing before Ramadan. And if it happens, what do? Another istighfar, another tawbah. You make it again, make another istighfar. Right? In Farsi, the Sha'ir says, Sad bar tawbah shikasti baza. Right? Even if you made 100 times, you broke your promise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you when you come back again. And that's a sign that you have faith. That's a sign of faith that you made istighfar and you recognize, right? You recognize the mistake. You recognize they're doing something wrong, right? A person who doesn't care about the mistakes that he or she does, and that's, inshallah, Allah will forgive. It's okay. That's one of the great sins that he doesn't care. And that's why the scholars say that smaller sins, the sagha'ir, illa al-lamam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah An-Najm. It's going to be, inshallah, tomorrow night we'll say Surah An-Najm. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشِ. Subhanallah. Again, those who abstain and they are protecting themselves from the great sins and from indecencies. Illa lamam, except for those minor sins, right? Some of the scholars say that illa lamam here, it means even the greater sins that a person quickly makes tawbah from. So illa lamam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives that. But if a person who continues to do even small sins and doesn't care about them, it leads to greater sins. In greater sins, it leads to being unthankful, ungrateful to Allah, which is kufr. And then eventually the person, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, may Allah protect us, that it goes to atheism. It's okay, what harm does it do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those people who make istighfar and make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if you made so many times you made a mistake, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala know that He is Ghafoor Ar-Rahim. He's the most forgiving, the most merciful. He will answer your call if you are sincere, and be sincere in your dua and asking for His forgiveness. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this Ramadan a Ramadan that will change us and to make us a better person, a better human being, a better Muslim, a better son, a better daughter, a better husband, a better father, and a better community member, a better human being that benefits others. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of our good deeds. Wa sallallahu wa sallam.